glycolysis. Pila ka NADH na produce? 2 ka NADH. Now, here, okay, so after glycolysis class, remember this is in the cytosol. This is in the cytosol. Now, okay, say, we'll have a summary of that glycolysis. So, pila ka ATP production, or we have gross ATP of, pila gani?
2.
Gross ATP,
And then ATP diba?
pila? 4
Gross.
ATP. Okay, less, how many were used up? Less expense. Pila ang nagamit? 2 ATP. So we have a net ATP of pila? 4 minus 2 equals a net of 2 ATP. Plus, as what I said, if there is no oxygen, one glucose molecule could only yield 2 ATP molecules. Yeah. Compare it with the presence of oxygen or aerobic respiration. Now, it can give you additional of 34, net 34 ATP. So, na mo siyang 36 plus this. And that is the amount of energy that is being taken out of one glucose molecule with the presence of oxygen. Net of 36. Without oxygen, only 2. So, when you run out of oxygen class, when we run out of oxygen, your cells will be suffocated. So that's why you will die. Few minutes without oxygen. Why? Because the brain cells, what I have said, take the lion's share in terms of energy requirement. And if this is said to be running out of oxygen, then the same is true with running out of energy. So, ang mahitabo, suffocated ang brain. So, we will die. Okay? Okay. Now, so this 2 ATP would be used up by the cell. Activities right away. Magamit na ni. However, these 2 pyruvate will be brought from the cytosol to the matrix. This will be transported from the cytosol to the matrix for Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle. Yeah. Okay. Now, which is part of the oxidative phosphorylation? We say oxidative phosphorylation, meaning with the presence of oxygen. And of course, these 2 NADH, however, will be brought to the free state for electron transport chain. Because this could further generate more ATP. Now, however, during the transport of these 2 NADH, it requires
ATP.
2 ATP for the transport. Meaning na ay pamasahe nga 2 ATP molecules. Or ba, makagamit siya. So, for every NADH, it requires 1 ATP molecule. Now, since we have 2 NADH here, it will be transported to the free state. So, it has to borrow 2 ATP molecules. So, this is utang. This is accounts payable. Bayaran niya na after it undergoes electron transfer chain. Yan ang bayaran.
So, ikaw na siya makabayad mo. Hindi siya
Makaginansya pa siya. Napaliginan siya. Okay? Okay, so, we are done with glycolysis. We are done with glycolysis. The pyruvate is transported to the matrix. The 2 NADH will be transported to the free state. And you have a net of 2 ATP which can be used by the cell. Then later on, we will compute further as to why there are net of 36 ATPs formed. Because other books mention 38 ATPs because they did not deduct this. But later on, accounts payable. So, later of courtesy ATP molecules. Now, to summarize, we have this. 2 molecules of pyruvate, 2 ATP molecules net. We have water molecules, and of course, we have the electrons trapped by, we have here, the electrons trapped by the NAD. So these two, NADH should be brought to the free state, pyruvate, 2 molecules of pyruvate to the matrix. Okay, now class. When the cell is run out of oxygen, now what will happen to pyruvate? Because, okay, you listen. When the cell will bring the pyruvate to the matrix, this requires oxygen. Now, say for example, a person is indulging in strenuous activities like mountain climbing. Now, when you go up to the mountain,
Less oxygen.
why there is less oxygen? Actually, there are abundant oxygen around. But what happened? Why it cannot get in? What happened to the atmospheric pressure when you go up?
It rises.
Huh? Atmospheric pressure. When you go up? What happened to the atmospheric pressure when the elevation is increased? Huh? Okay, so atmospheric pressure will be decreased when you go up. That's why we pump. Why? Because what pushes the air to get inside our lungs is the atmospheric pressure. Now, there are abundant supplies of oxygen around, but it could hardly get in because there is no pumping. No less ang pump sa atmospheric pressure because of the decreased atmospheric pressure when you go up. That's why you pump when you go up. So in other words, because when you go up, you will experience, say your cells will be deficient of oxygen. So the pyruvate then will undergo anaerobic respiration, or we call that lactic acid fermentation. Lactic acid fermentation. So ang pyruvate is converted into lactic acid. Now, during that time, when you keep undergoing anaerobic respiration, now there will be accumulation of this lactic acid in your muscles, and that causes then the pamaol or the muscle pains. So what causes such pamaol or muscle pains? Because of the accumulation of lactic acid due to insufficient supplies of oxygen. However, when oxygen is sufficient already, then the lactic acid can be converted back into pyruvate, and it enters now into the matrix for Krebs cycle. Are you with me? Now, in the case of, say, lower organisms like yeasts, are you familiar with yeasts? Okay, what's the function of yeast? Okay, pampatubo. Now, what makes the dough to rise? Okay, now, what is the yeast doing? Now, this is what happened to the, what the yeast is doing. No? Now, ang pyruvate, after glycolysis, of course, the yeast undergoes glycolysis. Now, there is formation of pyruvate. Now, the yeast will undergo alcoholic fermentation. Now, during alcoholic fermentation, ang production is, ang pyruvate is converted into ethanol ultimately. So, ethanol and then carbon dioxide. That's why, kana bang pag-dilute nimo sa yeast, butawan nimo water, later on magbula-bula. Now, what causes the bubble formation is the presence of carbon dioxide. And when you smell it, it smells like beer. Now, that beer-like smell is due to the formation of ethanol. Now, when the dough is rising, okay, when the dough is already rose up, Then, of course, you have to place them in the oven. The yeast will die because of heat. And, of course, when it's baked already, no, when you open it up, of course, the alcohol will just be liberated because it's heated. The ethanol will just escape into the atmosphere. Now, when you open it up, you could see holes, right? Abin mo, dako kayo ang imuhang cheese bread. Pag abin mo, dagko kayo yung hole. Those holes were previously occupied by carbon dioxide. So, dapat, pagkaon mong init nga bread, mo sa iyo, open to liberate the carbon dioxide. Okay na, gawas na na. That's why Manila, dili kayo magkaon ng init nga bread. So, ipa-liberate sa carbon dioxide. You have to let the carbon dioxide melt. Okay? So, that is alcoholic fermentation. Okay? So, if there is no oxygen, so you have the NADH can be converted into NAD. Pwede siya. Then another way must be found to reoxidize it. So, ang NADH convert into NAD. So, this is what happened in vertebrates when the organism undergoes strenuous activities. It undergoes, say the pyruvate is now converted into lactic acid by lactate dehydrogenase. Okay? So, when blood lactate reaches about 0.4 milligrams per 100 ml, in the muscle tissue will will become exhausted. Maabot lang gani na yung carbon dioxide to 0.4 mg per 100 ml sa inyong blood, then ma-expose ang inyong muscle mo ng muscle pains. So, you will experience muscle pains. Now, this is what happened for the yeast. Pyruvate is converted into acetaldehyde by an enzyme called pyruvate decarboxylase. Meaning, we say decarboxylase, D means removal, carbon dioxide. Itanggalan og CO2. No? Itanggalan og CO2. Pyruvate, itanggalan og CO2, so it becomes acetaldehyde. Then acetaldehyde converted into ethanol by alcohol dehydrogenase. D means removal of hydrogen. So, removal of hydrogen, ang NADH na himong niyan. So, it becomes now, acetaldehyde becomes ethanol. So, you have now, later on, for those with the presence of oxygen, those say if the oxygen is sufficient, so the pyruvate is converted into acetyl-CoA. So you have here oxidative decarboxylation, acetyl-CoA plus carbon dioxide plus NADH. Okay. So you have here later on. So we are done with glycolysis. Now next meeting we will be discussing Krebs cycle and electron transport chain, beta oxidation, meaning our breakdown